today is Remembrance Day, a day where we take some time to honor the brave men and women who fought for our freedom over the years. And our weekly political commentator, Scott Reid, joins us in a different role today. On this special day, we're honored to have him share a deeply personal story about his uncle, a World War II veteran, whose courage continues to inspire him. Good morning to you, Scott. Can't wait to hear more about the story. I got the sort of rough outline from you last night, but this sounds really fascinating.
Morning, Nick. Yeah, so, no municipal politics, no provincial politics, no federal politics. Today's Remembrance Day. And in our family, so many families have these stories, but in our family, my uncle, Stanley Kerr, they called him Tink. Tink Kerr in 1943 finds himself, small town Eastern Ontario boy, Marmor, Ontario, over across the Atlantic, becomes a tail gunner in a Halifax bomber. On their fifth mission, they're shot down. That's him there. On their fifth mission, they're shot down over Berlin. 7 of the guys in this plane. 1 is killed instantly as they're shot. 4 guys, including my uncle, bail out. They parachute behind enemy lines, literally in Nazi-held Germany. And 2 of them manage to fly the plane wounded back to Sweden. So my uncle lands with 3 of his pals. They run around in the woods, literally trying to escape the Nazis for 3 days before they're taken prisoner, end up at Stalag 4B in Muhlenberg, just on the other side, just on the German side of the Polish border, and spend 23 months there. Wow. And here's the thing. His mother, my great-grandmother, gets a telegram telling the family that he's been shot down and is presumed dead. And it takes a month before they learn that he's actually a POW. And then come letters and postcards from him from that POW camp for nearly 2 years.
That is pretty remarkable, isn't it? To think of the sort of the time lags, where your heart and your family goes, in the interim, to that is quite remarkable. Scott, I also know in your role, working very closely with the Liberal governments back in the day, you were there it was Holland for the 60th anniversary of VE Day. I wonder if you can take us back to that, because you really had an opportunity to get a really front row seat, really, to that ceremony and all the memories there as well.
Well, I think that sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that the political responsibility for leaders on Remembrance Day is to stand at the cenotaph, listen to the bugler and lay a wreath. And that's true. But as you mentioned, on the 60th anniversary of VE Day, I found myself with Prime Minister Paul Martin in Holland. And I can hardly think of a more moving occasion, because there is a cemetery. Of course, the Canadians liberated Holland. And there's a cemetery that's dedicated to the Canadian war dead there. So we celebrated on that day. We recognized and marked the passing of all those soldiers on VE Day 2005 in May. And it was remarkably moving. And so for people who watch these events and wonder, well, are these politicians mailing this in? They have stories like ours. They have an Uncle Tink, and they think about it. And it runs pretty deep on a day like today.
It certainly does. So let me ask you this, Scott, as we kind of wrap up the conversation here. There's a new poll out this morning suggesting that, about 7% fewer Canadians this year are going to mark Remembrance Day than they did just a year ago, despite the fact that this is, the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. I wonder what your thoughts are about, what we either need to do, or just the fact that fewer Canadians seem to be taking the time this year.
I suppose it's the march of time. When I was a kid, World War I veterans had passed. Now the World War II veterans have passed. So I suppose in that sense there's an inevitability to it, but I still think it's a tremendous shame, because the nature of this. I mean, imagine, I think about my uncle, after 23 months in a prisoner of war camp, this guy who had never hardly been outside of Eastern Ontario, now had been shot down in Germany, in Britain. It's like, all right, now go back to Marmora, right? Take a job, raise your family, live your life. It's a remarkable thing, and it ought to be remembered.
It is indeed, and that's what we're going to do today. Scott Reid, always appreciate this. Thanks so much for the personal story this morning. Thank you so much.